Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of my flashback videos. These are the videos in which I go back and take a look at a fight or a particular moment in time over my 37-year plus career, in which I look back at something very special. Well, very special fits what we're going to talk about today, because this is something that happened on May 7th, 2005, a battle between two fighters that would go down in history as perhaps one of the best lightweight championship fights, if not the best of all time. And that was when Diego Corrales took on Jose Luis Castillo. Now, going into this fight, Corrales was a world champion, as was Castillo. They each held different belts. Corrales had defended his title, had won two straight title matches, I should say, against Joel Casamayor and also against Acelino Freitas. And in the process of those two fights, trainer Joe Goosen had kind of remade Diego Corrales into much more of a boxer-puncher than a brawler that he was before, and Corrales seemed at the peak of his powers. As for Jose Luis Castillo, a 31-year-old Mexican champion, he had defended against Joel Casamayor in a very close fight. Casamayor, of course, a former champion, and beaten Julio Diaz. And the aggressive, constant pursuing Castillo had a style that he had even bedeviled Floyd Mayweather. He had fought Mayweather to a standstill twice. The first time, many people believe Castillo even beat Mayweather. I happen to think he did. Corrales, on the other hand, when he fought Mayweather, was beaten decisively and knocked out in that fight. So these two men, seemingly at the peak of their powers, were getting together in Las Vegas at the Mandalay Bay. As we stood there at ringside, getting ready to do our Showtime broadcast, we all knew we were about to see something special. We just didn't know how special. And ironically, even though we had been pumping this fight up for weeks, and everyone in the know in boxing knew that this was going to be a great matchup, there were only about 5,000 people at the Mandalay Bay for this fight. But those people would end up seeing something truly extraordinary. When the fight started, an interesting thing took place. Diego Corrales, who, as I mentioned, had become much more of a boxer-puncher and a fighter who was going to use his height and his length, as he did against Acelino Freitas and Jose Casamayor, came out completely differently for this fight. Amazingly, he got inside and slugged it out with the slugger, because that was what Castillo liked to do. And I remember saying on the broadcast, this is an interesting strategy. And it wasn't that Corrales didn't get some things done during those early rounds, but the question was, could he continue to do that through a whole fight? And was he playing into the battle plan of Jose Luis Castillo? But as the fight went on, Corrales gave as well as he got, cutting Jose Luis Castillo, staggering him on several occasions with left hooks that were amazing punches. And in those middle rounds, Corrales started to, in some ways, look like he might take control of this fight. Though it was a pitched battle, back and forth, fought not only with the kind of excitement of a Arturo Gatti, Mickey Ward fight, but fought on a much higher level in terms of skill. And finally, in the 10th round, Jose Luis Castillo turned things to his advantage by twice knocking down Diego Corrales. And after the second knockdown, and Corrales twice having spit his mouthpiece out, he went to his corner where his trainer, Joe Goosen, gave him a tongue lashing. He used that moment to stall for a moment, to not only give his fighter some extra time, but also to tell him in no uncertain terms, your career's on the line, everything's on the line, you got to get him right now. There was no strategy. It was simply a motivational speech to say, you've got to go after him. That seemed improbable because of what had just transpired, and yet, what did Diego Corrales do? He went after Jose Luis Castillo. Landed a series of punches, he landed first a really good counter punch when Castillo was coming in, and then put Castillo on the ropes, landed a bunch of unanswered punches, and Tony Weeks came in and stopped this fight with one of the most improbable endings that we had ever seen in a fight, because here was Corrales in huge trouble in round 10, completely turned things around to win this fight. Now, had this match not had that dramatic ending, it still would have been one of the best fights that I've ever called. But with that dramatic ending, it becomes the best, certainly, that I've ever called. It becomes probably the best lightweight championship match of all time, and one of the best title fights that was ever staged. Now, there were so many elements to this fight that I thought were fascinating from both an analytical standpoint and a human standpoint. I mentioned that Corrales literally fought a different style than everyone expected him to fight, and somehow made that work because he got the win, even if it put him in harm's way, and maybe it caused this fight to be even more difficult for him. And maybe he couldn't have boxed Castillo. The master boxer, Mayweather, couldn't box him. Castillo forced him into a firefight, and Mayweather just barely got out with the decision. For Jose Luis Castillo, he fought the kind of inside battle that he loves and did it extraordinarily well. And I have to say one other thing about the technical aspect of this fight. The inside fighting by these two men during the course of this fight is the very best combination by two men of fighting on the inside that I have ever seen in my boxing career. It was staggeringly good. And so Diego Corrales won this match, and it was a fight that obviously fans wanted to see again. And it turned out they would, in fact, fight a rematch some 5 months later. It turned out to be anticlimactic because Jose Luis Castillo won that by knockout. It wasn't really a competitive fight. And in fact, this particular fight seemed to take so much out of Diego Corrales that his career was never quite the same after that. We all know he passed away tragically from a motorcycle accident. And Jose Luis Castillo went on to continue to campaign. His career started to fade a bit, and he was never quite the fighter that he was at this point either. So this was the moment in each of these men's career where they created something that was so extraordinary and so good that it lives on in time. There is not a day that goes by that some boxing fan doesn't reference this fight in talking to me. It was certainly the most exciting broadcast I've been involved in, and I've done, as you know, many, including Hagler-Hearns and so many other fights. I always talk about this fight as Hagler-Hearns times 3 because it had the same excitement as Hagler-Hearns, but went on longer, 3 times as long. My partner on this broadcast was the great Steve Albert. I love the call he and I did. I'm proud of it. We let the action speak for itself for the most part, but we were able to accentuate the action with hopefully some things that help the viewer. And at the end of the day, that's when a sportscaster has done their job, when they can allow you to experience a very exciting event and simply accentuate the moments that will help you and give you a little bit of information and insight that will help you enjoy it even more. So Diego Corrales and Jose Luis Castillo gave all of us something extraordinary in 2005 that will live on in the annals of boxing history. That's our flashback for today, and we'll see you with more in the future.